the correlation, it could be just coincidence, of course, but when you consider the nature of who we're going to be looking at with Israel, not all of these things, for sure, not all these things are coincidence. Israel still has a special place in God's eye. We're going to go through that and see some of these things as we go through and start from the Old Testament, pick up where we left off 2 weeks ago, and continue on. Oh, sorry. Still getting the hang of glasses and things like that. So God's love for Israel. Let's start with Jeremiah chapter 3. So part of the argument for today in modern times is that the modern state of Israel and its government commits horrid, anti-humane acts, and as such, Christians should not support such a state because God does not support such a state. Because they argue that God's plan for Israel or God's vision for Israel, it's not yet fulfilled. It will not, what God talks about blessing Israel doesn't happen until the kingdom. So for us now, that doesn't include us trying to bless Israel. First of all, though, the interesting thing is if we're told to bless Israel and they look at it that Israel's not supposed to, that the Israel that God's talking about promising to bless and promising to care for from the Old Testament is not taking place until the kingdom, then when are we supposed to bless Israel? I mean, there's no choice in the kingdom. I mean, Israel has dominance then. That's where the seat of power will be. So if God's telling the people, as he will in Romans, and we'll look at that, well, we can't wait until then, and we didn't exist back in the Old Testament, so that must mean now, right? And supporting the people of God, God's chosen people, does not mean endorsing acts that they may do that are not good acts. I mean, again, people get so worked up in a political theater of ideas that the thought is pushed that, oh, you support this, so you support everything, so I can't be around you. Well, in Baptist circles, we have this thing called, we don't believe this, secondary separation, where they have that similar thing, where if Brother Morrissey has a church, he's pastors, and he has Pastor Bo in, and I don't like Pastor Bo, but I like Pastor Morrissey, but once he has Pastor Bo in, now I won't communicate with him anymore, even though I like him, because he had somebody in that I don't like. Therefore, he must agree with everything he says, so I won't agree with anything he says, and I cut off our friendship. You know what that is? That's childish. It's an inability to look at a full picture and realize we're different people. We're not all going to have the same ideas and beliefs. As long as we stick to the core things of what the Bible teaches are non-negotiable, why can't we have that fellowship? And I still be friends with him, even if I'm not going to let him come in and preach at my church. I can still be friends with him. Otherwise, you're going to be a very lonely person. And you won't ever get married either, because guess what? Your spouse isn't going to agree with you on everything. Right, honey? Well, we agree on that we don't agree on everything. So, Jeremiah chapter 3, let's start there. They say, if a man put away his wife and she go from him and become another man's, shall he return unto her again? Shall not that land be greatly polluted? So God's using his own teachings about the putting a wife away and the fact that once he put them away and they go to another man's, they become, that's adultery that they've left and married another. Now you take them back, they're polluted. That's not something you were supposed to do. Look at what it keeps saying. But thou hast played the harlot with me, with many lovers. Yet return again to me, saith the Lord. Lord gives that example of a husband and wife to stir up those feelings of what his command was regarding that, and how they would feel as a husband if the wife left and married another, and would you take her back again? And God says, Israel, you've done that to me. Yet return again. This is not even the age of grace. And God has extended amazing amount of grace to his people because of his promises to them. Of course, when they disobeyed, they were taken into captivity, they were punished. There was a pause on the blessings that they received as part of the promises because they were not keeping up their end of it. It was the conditional promise of follow God, receive blessings. But not that they would not receive the promises that God had given them. The unconditional, that you are my people and you will remain my people. You are the apple of his eye. So look at verse number 5. Will he reserve his anger forever? Will he keep it to the end? Behold, thou hast spoken and done evil as thou couldest. So he said, well, will you keep that anger all the way to the end? You did, and did all the evil things that you possibly could. And yet, verse 6 and 7, the Lord said also unto me in the days of Josiah the king, hast thou seen that which backsliding Israel hath done? She is gone up upon every high mountain and under every green tree, and there hath played the harlot. And I said, after she had done all these things, turn thou unto me. But she returned not, and her treacherous sister Judah saw it. And I saw when for all the causes whereby backsliding Israel committed adultery, I had put her away and given her a bill of divorce. Yet her treacherous sister Judah feared not, but went and played the harlot also. So he's saying, I've already done this, and now Judah didn't even fear what happened. She went and became just like her sister, Israel. And it came to pass through the lightness of her whoredom that she defiled the land and committed adultery with stones and with stocks. And yet for all this, her treacherous sister Judah hath not turned unto me with her whole heart, but feignedly, said the Lord. So Judah came back and faked coming to God. And God knows the heart. God said, you didn't really do it with all your heart. But look at verse 12. Go and proclaim these words toward the north and say, return, thou backsliding Israel, saith the Lord, and I will not cause mine anger to fall upon you, for I am merciful, saith the Lord, and I will not keep anger forever. Only acknowledge thine iniquity, that thou hast transgressed against the Lord thy God, and hast scattered thy ways to the strangers under every green tree. And ye have not obeyed my voice, saith the Lord. Turn, O backsliding children, saith the Lord, for I am married unto you. And I will take you one of a city and two of a family, and I will bring you to Zion. And I will give you pastures according to mine heart, which shall feed you with knowledge and understanding. Look at what God told them. You've committed whoredoms and adultery against me, and I'll take you back. Husbands, if your wife cheated on you, not once, but again and again and again and again and again and again, how likely would you be to say, acknowledge that what you've done is wrong, and come on back? And I'm going to not only receive you back, I'm going to give you things, people to help you to be able to continue in the way that I would have for you, so we can continue as one. How many people, how many guys would feel good about that? That would not be an easy thing to do. Especially when you consider Judah, one of the ones he's talking to, comes back and says, oh, I'm so sorry. But didn't mean it and went out and did it again. So could you actually believe it if they came back and said, I promise I'll never do it again, after they'd already done it again and again and again? And that's God's mercy. It says, I know you're going to do it again. And there'll be punishment. But if you come back, I will restore you. This was what God said to them in a period of law, not grace, that if you do this, I'll restore you. And I will give you pastors to help you to go in the way. And so it goes on through here and continues to talk about in the future as well. So God gave them an incredible amount of opportunity again and again and again and again. You mess up, you come back, and I'll take you again. So why would people think that now, after God had sent his Messiah, the promised one, that now God would be like, no, I'm done with you forever. You had your chance, you blew it, you're done. Now, as we're going to see, there is, because of their national rejection of the Messiah, there is some negatives that goes to them as a nation as a result of that, but God didn't reject them and say, I'm done with you forever. God didn't do it because he promised them, you are my people, I will be your God. Now, as part of the punishment for it, what happened? They would go into captivity. Then you had the 400 silent years between the time of the prophets and the time of the Gospels when God just didn't speak to them. I'm not going to tell you, husbands or wives, how to handle things in your home, but let's say 4 years of silent treatment. That would be pretty significant, would it not? This was God saying, you know what, I've given you again and again and again and again, and you don't want to listen. So you know what, I'm going to withhold my voice for a while. I'm going to withhold my messengers until you're ready to hear what I've sent for you. And they still didn't. Even though they had the summation of God's promises, they had the Old Testament, they were scouring through it looking, we know the time is coming when the Messiah will come. They knew all of that. And they still missed it because of it didn't fit within what they thought. Maybe if they had not rejected God so much, they would be more attuned and have received more prophets to be able to help them be more spiritually prepared for that. That's not on God, that's on them. And look at that, even during that time of silence, where was Israel during the silent period, towards the end of the silent period up until the Gospels? Where was Israel located? They're located in Israel. How many people do you know that happens to? That a nation gets conquered? Now, of course, Rome did that with many of the places they conquered, and they'd set up their governors and the kings within the tetrarchs there. But you just look at the freedom and liberty that God gave them in their own country, to where they could have their own religious leaders tell the king, we're not doing it that way. This is what you're going to do for us. I call that still some blessings from God, that they still had that kind of power in their own country. Let's look at another famous verse that we use as the people of God. And I don't believe it's a misuse of it, but this here in 2 Chronicles 7:14, God was speaking to his people through Solomon. And we're going to start in verse 12. And the Lord appeared to Solomon by night and said unto him, if I have heard thy prayer and have chosen this place to myself for an house of sacrifice, if I shut up heaven, that there be no rain, or if I command the locusts to devour the land, or if I send pestilence among my people, if my people, which are called by my name, shall humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven and will forgive their sin and will heal their land. Now mine eyes shall be open and mine ears attent unto the prayer that is made in this place. So this is at the consecration of the temple, saying, okay, here's what's going to happen. If they do something, that's why he said, if there's all these things that are going to happen, not shut up the heavens, send pestilence, this and that, it's happening because of the wicked ways that he talks about in verse 14. So he's cursing that because of the wicked ways that they have, he's punishing them. He says, if you come and seek my face in this place, this is the place where I will be attuned to hearing the prayers of. That's the formation of the temple worship. That's what he was telling them. This is where I'm listening for the prayers to be made. If you leave me and you humble yourself and come back here, I'll heal you and forgive your land. That's amazing. That he didn't just say, you know what, I'm done. You look at what Israel did to God again and again and again and again and again. I mean, I would argue that even though, they are worshiping traditions of men, for sure right now, the Jewish people are. But I would say that according to their knowledge, their worship is more tuned towards God than it was in all this part of the Old Testament. Because then they were turning to the false gods of the other nations, worshiping idols that they knew were wrong. Now, they're worshiping their idea of God according to the Old Testament and the traditions that go with it by the rabbinical leaders of the past. That's what they're following, but they think they're following God. So I would say if back then God punished them because they were following after idols, and he restored them when they came back to him. Now they're not following idols per se, they're following their idea of what they believe God has taught them, and what they're supposed to follow. You think God's going to throw them off forever now? He did it under the time of the law, and he's not doing that now either. Let's look at another one, Jeremiah chapter 18. Jeremiah 18 and verse number 6. Sorry. Almost there. There we go. 18 verse 6 through 10. O house of Israel, can I do with you as this potter, saith the Lord? Behold, as the clay is in the potter's hand, so are ye in my hand, O house of Israel. At what instant I shall speak concerning a nation and concerning a kingdom, to pluck up and to pull down and to destroy it. If that nation against whom I have pronounced turn from their evil, I will repent of the evil that I thought to do unto them. And at what instant I shall speak concerning a nation and concerning a kingdom, to build and to plant it, if it do evil in my sight, that it obey not my voice, then I will repent of the good wherewith I said, I would benefit them. So he's saying, I can do this to anybody. If they follow me, I can do good. If they won't, I can do evil. And that's what he did with Israel throughout their time of going against God, worshiping other idols, and all that. So let's see here. Let me catch up. All right. Let's go to Romans chapter 11. We're going to be here for quite a bit. We'll start in verse 25 to understand. Now, this is Israel in the age of grace, or the church age, which came about because Israel rejected the Messiah. And God would have set up his kingdom had they received him as the Messiah. And that pause that had been put on Israel would not have been, the timeline for Israel would not have been paused. That the kingdom would have been ushered in. However, their rejection caused the gospel to go forth and to even the Gentiles that we could come in. So in a way, we can be thankful that by somebody else's rejection, we were able to come in, and the Gentiles themselves were very activate windows. The Gentiles themselves were actually very excited when they heard that the gospel had come to them. So let's look at Romans chapter 11, verse 25. Paul talks here and says, "For I would not, brethren, that ye should be ignorant of this mystery, lest ye should be wise in your own conceits, that blindness in part that happened to Israel, until the fullness of the Gentiles be come in. So because of the rejection of Jesus Christ, as a nation, there is blindness in part that has come to them." You cannot believe how many pastors had told me that they would not have me in as a missionary because Israel was blinded. Well, we see it says in part, as a nation, as individuals, they can still trust Jesus Christ to save them. Their eyes being blinded, it is more difficult for a Jew to see Jesus as Messiah, but they can still do that. And so I had a couple other churches that said, well, no, we don't support missionaries to Israel because the Bible says that God's going to save them in the end as a nation. That's good, but when is that going to be? It's going to be after the tribulation, we know that, but when is that? Because I'm telling you right now, there are people dying tonight that could receive the gospel. So Paul tells us and says, listen, blindness in part hath happened to them. So there is a blindness that they're dealing with as a nation. But he starts out this chapter by really, if these people that claim to be Bible-believing Christians would read the Bible, they would see what God's thought on casting off Israel was. When it starts out with, I say then, hath God cast away his people? God forbid. Boom. There, that should be it. He says, for I also am an Israelite of the seed of Abraham, of the tribe of Benjamin. So there's an example that he gives that says, listen, we can still get in as Jews. I'm an Israelite and I am in. So it's not, nobody can get saved. Can you imagine if Anna and I've drawn a blank. Who is the man that received Saul? Yeah, was it? Yeah. And he, imagine if he was one of those pastors. Nope, sorry, he's a Jew. He can't get saved. Well, we wouldn't have the foundational books for the New Testament church if it wasn't for Paul. Look at verse number 2. We'll read a few of these verses. God hath not cast away his people, which he foreknew. Wot ye not what the scripture saith of Elias, how he maketh intercession to God against Israel, saying, Lord, they have killed thy prophets, and digged down thine altars, and I am left alone, and they seek my life. But what saith the answer of God unto him? I have reserved to myself 7,000 men, who have not bowed the knee to the image of Baal. So even then, in the nation's rejection of God, God still said, I have kept 7,000 for me that have not bowed down. So even when the nation turns against God, there's individuals that still go for God. And so God is not going to write off the entire nation and all the people because as a nation they rejected it, because the nation is still made up of people, and he still wants those individuals that he can find. But what saith, verse 5, even so then at this present time also there is a remnant according to the election of grace. And if by grace, then it is no more of works. Otherwise grace is no more grace. But if it be of works, then it is of no more grace. Otherwise work is no more work. What then? Israel hath not obtained that which he seeketh for, but the election hath obtained it, and the rest were blinded. According as it is written, God hath given them the spirit of slumber, eyes that they should not see, and ears that they should not hear unto this day. And David saith, Let their table be made a snare, and a trap, and a stumbling block, and a recompense unto them. Let their eyes be darkened, that they may not see, and bow down their back always. So God's telling him, yes, there is something that they as a people are having to deal with because of their rejection of the Messiah. But there's a remnant, and has not cast off, as he said in the very first verse, he has not cast off his people. That shift that happened here meant there was a pause in the fulfillment for Israel. It did not mean that God was done with Israel, as Paul writes about here. Romans 10:1, again, if Paul is a disciple of Jesus Christ, if he was instructed by God that God was done with Israel, then he probably would not have written this, verse 1. Brethren, my heart's desire and prayer to God for Israel is that they might be saved. That was his prayer for his people. If they could not be saved, why would he keep praying that to God if God says, no, forget it, they're done. There's nothing that can be done for them. They're hopeless, I'm rejecting them. Because God didn't do that. So we're going to look through some things here. And we're going to see, let's see. Okay, sorry. Okay, we're going to look at some of these things of history. Now, there are, these are different things that even secular people, even the non-God-fearing Jews of those days and now, the historians, would still say there's something miraculous that happened in all these events. Because when you look at the numbers of probability, which we'll look at a couple of these different miracles, there's no way these things could have happened. And the very first one that we'll look at is 1948, and that was the War of Independence for Israel. Think about this, 1945, 1946, the war is over, they're beginning to be released from the concentration camps, and they're getting this urge to go home. Remember, this wasn't actually their home. Most of the Jews that were in the concentration camps, they were European Jews. They lived in Germany, Poland, Russia. They lived in Greece. They lived in Spain. They lived in all these different places. But now they're feeling we need to go to our homeland, a place that was called Palestine that was run by the British. And so they started going over in any way they could, by train, by boat, anything to get to Israel. And Britain was like, we're not doing this. This is too many of you. We're only going to allow 1,500 a month. And to the point that when there were ships that were coming in, 4,500, they would turn them around and send them back to Europe. People that were just released from concentration camps. And finally, in 1947, they had struck something that said, okay, you need to allow more to come in. Britain said, we will relinquish this land. Before they could even do that, though, May 14th, 1948, Israel declared their independence and said, this is now our land. And they had to fight a war for that. If you've seen pictures and read stories about the Holocaust, these people were war-weakened. These people had their life savings and life work stolen from them. How in the world do you have a people like that from multiple regions and nations and even languages be able to come together with nothing more in common than a bloodline and a land that belonged to them 2,000 years ago and say, let's form an army and fight the British and anybody else that gets in our way? How do you achieve victory through that? You don't, only through God having his hand upon them. Suez Crisis in 1956. This is 7 years into being a nation. Egypt decided, you know what, we're going to shut down the Suez Canal. We're not going to allow goods to Israel or Israeli goods out. Well, they ended up regretting that immensely, because a nation that was only 7 years old came in and actually took over the Sinai Peninsula. Wow. That's a little, you might say, overreaching. Well, you shut down a canal and don't let, and Israel's like, we're just going to take the whole peninsula. They ended up having to give it back, but everybody that looked at that warfare at the time said, this is because the hand of God is on this country. This is not possible for it to happen like that. Let's see another one. 6-Day War, 1967. This one was very unique in that Egypt, they moved in to they went past the UN established lines. into the Sinai, and they closed the straits of Tiran, and Syria and Jordan joined them, and they formed an alliance to come against Israel. And just 1 day, 2 days into it, Israel destroyed most of the Egyptian Air Force on the ground. I mean, it was such a devastating blow to Egypt that they could not counter because their Air Force was gone. And in 6 days only, Israel defeated Jordan, Egypt, and Syria. 3 nations that had multiple times the number of people that were in Israel, much larger forces and much more skilled, experienced forces with better equipment. And Israel defeated them and pushed them all back, even going past the lines that had been established up into the Golan Heights. They took back part of Jerusalem that they had not had in years. I met a man who was a paratrooper. In fact, I think it was, wasn't Netanyahu, who was it? It was Ehud Barak, was one of the, like most of the prime ministers that have served, and I'm not sure about Golda Meir, but most of the prime ministers that have served in Israel, they were generals or colonels or something and had fought in the different wars of history for Israel. But they had paratroopers that were coming into the gates in that part of Jerusalem to take it over in 1967, and they took that back. So it was like, okay, Egypt's like, we're forming an alliance, we're coming to get you. And Israel's like, no, we're going to actually destroy you, and we're actually going to take more land. That typically doesn't happen either. And again, people pointed to the fact this had to be God. The Yom Kippur War. Yom Kippur is the most holy day to the Jews, and so while the nation's reservists were in times of worship in their synagogues, this and that, again, here comes Egypt and Syria. They launched a surprise attack that it did greatly take them by surprise. They made deep advances into Israel and destroyed many of their tanks and their aircraft in just a few days. And within 72 hours, the IDF pushed them back and they stopped the Egyptian advance, pushed the Syrian forces back, and then counterattacked and went into Syria. In 72 hours. Imagine you are in full worship mode. Your reservists are with family all over the country. Within 72 hours, you're not able to just stop the advances, but you go and take back land from the other country that's trying to come at you. Again, they actually crossed the Suez Canal, and they encircled the Egyptian army, and they were actually within striking distance of Cairo. Wouldn't you think that countries would say, maybe it's not good to go after Israel? We could lose our capital. You think about all the different wars that have happened, it's very rare for this type of thing. And again, a country that has only been in existence at that point for 25 years, that this type of thing would happen. The Entebbe rescue. How many people remember Entebbe? I obviously don't remember it from having been alive, but from having read about it. Entebbe in Uganda, they took over an Air France flight that had over 100 passengers on it, Jewish passengers, Israeli passengers, and they put it down in Entebbe. The terrorists put it down in Entebbe. And the Israeli government sent a squad of commandos 2,000 miles. Now, normally when they have a hostage rescue, what do? They call in whoever has jurisdiction of the area. You know, like we have, Rochester Police has a SWAT team, Monroe County has a SWAT team. You'd call them in to do a rescue. Israel sent their forces 2,000 miles to go there. And they had said at the time, if everything goes as we planned, we have an 80% chance of success. If one thing does not go the way we planned, any one thing, no matter how small, that drops to 1%. Now, when you're taking a group of commandos 2,000 miles, and you're trying to trick these terrorists, you're coming in at night, you're trying to trick them that you're something that you're really not, and you have to try to free 100 hostages from terrorists, you think anything could go wrong? And they lost one of their soldiers and 3 hostages. And to this day, they say it's one of the greatest hostage rescues in history of modern warfare. Amazing. Also during this time, 1972, it's not up here, but 1972 was the Munich Olympics, and that's when they took hostage many of the Israeli athletes and coaches, and they took them to the airport in Bavaria and eventually killed them with grenades and gunfire. Israel did something that most countries would never consider. and imagine this too, they were on that ground. They were very nervous about going there. It was the first time Israeli people had gone back to Germany, many, since World War II. And so one generation later, you're going back. So they looked at it as like a great opportunity to raise the Israeli flag of their new nation since they last were there, and to be able to compete in sport, a unifying thing worldwide. And instead it became a very devastating thing for the nation. It took them 25 years, but they killed every single person that had anything to do with any part of that. It was up until 1997, they killed the last one in Paris, France. And systematically, one by one. And here's the thing, when people say, Israel, they don't care about anybody else but themselves. There was one instance where there was it was either a planner or a financier was in his home. They had wired his phone with explosives when he was out at work, and they called him. They knew he was home, they heard his voice, but his daughter answered the phone. And so they wouldn't do it. Then opportunity, how easy is it going to be to get back in the home? I think they went back in later on and they put a bomb under his bed when they knew his wife and daughter were going to be gone. And they blew him up then. But they just went to great lengths to make sure that only the guilty paid, even though the people that did this stuff made sure that anybody with Jewish blood was a victim. Let's keep going here. A strike on Iraq's reactor. Again, I'm not yet born, but the Osirak reactor in June of 1981, it was believed that they were about to go hot and be able to start producing nuclear weapons within weeks. And so Israel actually kind of deceived America at the time with, they had was F-16s, and they said we need long-range fuel tanks for our planes. The problem was they only sold the F-16s to Israel for defensive reasons. So why does Israel need long-range fuel tanks for defensive measures? So they actually ended up buying them through France by doing some trading, backdoor trading, and they ended up when they finally went and did this, they took their 6 planes in such a formation that on radar it looked like a monster, like a jumbo jet. That's how close they were flying across the airspace of enemy nations. They got there, dropped the bombs, and again, choosing to do it at a time when it was not going to be inflicting mass casualties on innocents that would be working there, and headed back and didn't lose a single plane. America chastised them greatly. Ronald Reagan was the president, chastised them greatly in the press, but later on, the ambassador of the United States, who was one of the planners of that mission, he had a signed photograph of the satellite imagery of the reactors being blown up that was given to him by Donald Rumsfeld after Gulf War. I said, thank you. Because that made America's job a lot easier during the Gulf War, that they didn't have nuclear bombs to deal with when they're dealing with Saddam Hussein. Again, people said there is no chance that they could have gone that distance and not lost a single person. Of course, there's no human chance. Gulf War, 1990, 1991, Saddam Hussein, I was alive now, but Saddam Hussein had launched multiple Scud missiles to Israel. That was his plan. Like, okay, America, you're going to threaten me, I'm going to bomb Israel, because obviously he couldn't bomb America, so he's going to bomb America's closest friend, Israel. When we were in Haifa, there's a mall that's nickname is Scud Mall, because a Scud missile had landed in the mall and it detonated, and actually did not kill nearly as many people as it should have. In fact, that's one of the miracles of this war. So many missiles landed, so many Scuds landed throughout Israel, especially targeting Tel Aviv. Even for being something that was a very directional weapon, they still hit sometimes very empty places. They hit population areas which, for whatever reason, nobody was there. People just didn't go there that day. People got home late, and so the homes were empty. And so they had far fewer casualties during the Gulf War than should have been, by any estimation by a war strategist, based on the targets and where those missiles hit. 1990s to 2000s, terrorism and suicide bombings. I was in Jerusalem in 2010. We met with a family that we were giving money to as part of our charity organization, and I was running the Jerusalem Marathon, the inaugural Jerusalem Marathon the next day. And my dad and I left the expo center, and we got in our car, and we're driving to the mall, and all of a sudden we start hearing all these sirens and everything. We heard something, but we didn't know what it was. We get to the mall, all the TVs are showing 5 minutes after we left, a bus bomb had gone off. It had a very crowded expo, a bus that was filled with people, should have been. We'd just been there 5 minutes before. One person died. Still tragic, but in a place where they the way these terrorists make these bombs, this one I think actually was on the pole next to the bus, but what they do is, for suicide bombers, they take wood forms, and they fill it with little ball bearings, or tacks. Sometimes they'll fill it with sharp little stones, rocks, whatever they can put in, and then cover it with rat poison. They'll put nails in there, things like that. Then they pack it with plastic explosive, pour all those things on top of it, pour the rat poison in there too, so that way when those things puncture the body, if they don't die right away, they will eventually die or be very seriously hurt by the poison. And then they cover it again with more explosive, and they put that under their shirts. And they wear them right here because they want the force of the explosion to hit mid-core for people so that they can inflict the most mass casualty possible. Again and again, over a 20-year period, those bombings had far fewer deaths than it should have. They were being nightclubs with 300 people. And what they would typically do is they'd have somebody go in with a small yield bomb to kill as many as they could, but they didn't really so much care about them. They wanted the responders. So what would happen is they'd have somebody else ready, so when the police and ambulance and emergency workers came, then that person would detonate themselves with a larger bomb. And still, far fewer people were killed than should have been, to the point that Israel still says it's God's hand of protection on us that we did not face more casualties. In 2006 through today, rocket wars in the Iron Dome. This is an interesting one. You know how many rockets a day go into Israel, or did prior to the war? I have an app on my phone. It's called Red Alert or something like that. And it tells you when a launch happens, and they follow the trajectory of it to see where the missile or rocket or that might go. The Katyusha rockets, these rockets that were launched, they're short-range things they launched from Gaza and Lebanon. They weren't very accurate, and they didn't have a great range. But again, they were not being discriminate in who they targeted. They just wanted to hit people. My brother and I were in Israel one time driving, and sure enough, we hear like a noise, and then we're on like a desert road. There's nobody around us but us and another car, the road running parallel to us like a mile away. And it hits the front of that car. They weren't targeting that car. It's just that they were targeting a town 10 miles away. So you say, well, that's why not many people are killed. They're targeting areas, densely populated areas, and still it didn't happen. Now, there are some days 4,000 rockets a day or missiles. 4,000. And they have this defense system called Iron Dome that is so effective, it captures between 85 to 95% of any launched munition coming into the country. Now, to give you an idea, the SR something 400 out of Russia, it's like supposed to be one of the most technically advanced weapon defense systems there is. That could only get 40%. Patriot missiles could get 50-something%. They say the probability of any system today getting even half of what the Iron Dome gets is 0. They say that it's actually mathematically impossible for even that system to stop the amount of missiles coming in as it does. They say it's not even realistic that it should be able to do that. So is that technology, or is that God? Here's the sad part. While many of the Jews will still say, God blesses us and we're so thankful for Jehovah, a lot of them still just think it's their thing that's doing it. Look at Second Lebanon War, happened in 2006. They had thousands of rockets coming in, had a guerrilla war, fought in southern Lebanon, And it was such a low number of casualties for Israel compared to what Lebanon suffered that it, while still tragic, it was way less than Lebanon had factored in. They lost multiple times more, and it severely devastated their ability in southern Lebanon to be able to, which is where the seat of Hezbollah was, to do any type of thing for a very long time until recently. 2007 Syrian reactor. How many people remember that? It's kind of crazy because nobody would have known about it except for one thing. Syria had Bashar Assad had a reactor being built by North Korea in their country, and it was ready to produce nuclear weapons, hidden and all this type of stuff. And Israel found out about it through capturing a spy's laptop that had pictures of it and pictures of the Koreans on site with it and the location of where it was. Israel again sent F-16s and I think it was F-16s. They sent them in to bomb this place. And they knew, because Syria didn't really have it, that nobody would know that Israel actually hit it. So on the way out of the country, they dropped an Israeli fuel tank in the Syrian desert. They knew it would be picked up and found, and people would be like, why is there an Israeli fuel tank in Syria? And that was like their little calling card of, you can't hide it. We got it, and the world's going to know about it. And sure enough, it did. As news reports came out, and Syria never said anything. In fact, they quickly built over the ruins so that even satellites would not be able to see that something had happened. And 2014, 2025 with Hamas, Lebanon, and Iran. They, obviously we know what happened with Lebanon and the Hezbollah with pagers. We're talking that thing, you remember everybody know about the pagers? Okay. That operation started 10 years ago by starting and putting somebody in the Netherlands at start a shipping company that they knew would eventually have pagers that would go through, in the walkie-talkies the Hezbollah operatives would use. They waited 10 years for it to make its way through to get to everybody, and then detonate them all at once. And then when people went to the funerals, then they detonated the walkie-talkies. So they not only killed or maimed all the people of note in Hezbollah, but they also made sure they couldn't communicate anymore. And again, it's like, how many different types of ways and places do you think they could use to ship? They're going to use that particular place that was established 10 years ago, and it's something amazing to think, you think God might have helped manipulate something to make it happen? This was not by chance. This was not because they were so good, though they are. Iran, that should be the end of the discussion. Anybody that's lived in the last 2 years and saw Iran launch a massive attack against Israel, and Israel not only fended off, but then eventually launched their own attack to take out, again, limiting it to military targets and things like that to try to minimize civilian casualties, while also taking out, I think they took out the entire command structure of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. You know how difficult that is to do? Like, they are, when I was there, I was near their reactor that is now gone, and they had like tractor trailers loaded with Iranian Revolutionary Guards that they would use to cycle out at those places and guard their scientists. So they came into a gas station where I was. There's like 120 of these guys in their black uniforms. These are their elites that they would spare no expense to protect their scientists and all that. Their command structure was much greater protected than that. And Israel still managed to do that. They built drones inside Iran and launched them from inside Iran and used these drones to target people's windows precisely. Instead of launching a missile to take out the whole building, they would target a window so they would not have to kill more than the least of their target. Okay, so then you have everyday miracles that have happened from 1948 till now. You look at the land of Israel. It was a barren land. If you, hopefully when you go there someday, the southern part of Israel is just desert. You go to the northern part, it's mountainous. It is a desert land. There's not a lot of great places for agriculture. And yet it has become one of the top 10 GDP per capita nations in the world since 1948. They turned a place that was good for nothing land-wise. In fact, they don't really have any meaningful natural resources that are being currently used and sold. no oil, and they have a higher GDP per capita than any of their neighbors. We're talking even Saudi Arabia, by double. Saudi Arabia is 27,000 per capita. Israel's 54,000. The only ones that are higher would be like Bahrain and Qatar, which is like 60, 65,000. And it's because it's all oil-based. But they have a larger economy than Egypt, in spite of the fact that Egypt has 11 times more, a larger population. It's the highest research and development spending per capita in the world. Over 6,000 tech startups in that country. We're talking a country of a few million people. They have greater universities than all their neighboring nations. Some of them are, their universities are top 100 in the world. Patents per capita, top 10 in the world. You know how many all their neighbors have? Almost none. Not per capita, like no patents. All their neighbors that do have any money have to all their neighbors have to rely either on oil or foreign aid. In fact, there's a number recently that came out, people are mad about America giving $3 billion to Israel every year. The studies showed that it actually has a return of, I think, $43 billion to America. It's like, I'm not an economist, but it seems like a good investment. That seems like America first. If you're able to get that kind of return on aid, look at what we give to Africa. That's charity, because we're not getting anything back on that type of scale. So you look at what Israel has gone on in Israel in 70 years, less than that, they are able to have, almost 80 years, that they're able to get all that they have as a nation. That doesn't happen because people are smart. There are people there, when you go to the Holocaust Memorial, there are signs, that will say, for instance, one of the most kind of depressing places I've ever been is the Children's Memorial. And what they did, they have one candle that, using mirrors, reflects it to 1.5 million candles. That's what it looks like when you go in. And they announce the name, age, and home city of every child 16 and under that died in the Holocaust. 1.5 million. It takes something like 2 years to cycle through them all. When you go outside, they have an image of the boy who it was dedicated in honor of, like a 3-year-old boy that died there. His parents paid for that. His parents were in a concentration camp. It's like, wait, how did they? Can you imagine if your parents were in a concentration camp? What kind of wealth do you think you'd have? Even if it's generational, the Nazis took up most of that. It wasn't like they could just, everybody get all their money back. You go to New York City, so many of them are generationally, are a generation, 2 generations down from Holocaust survivors or people that died in the Holocaust. And look what they've done with what they've had. To the point that, I think it's something like 50% of all telecom companies are owned by Jews. Something like 60 to 70% of banks have majority shareholders that are Jews. Many sports teams, majority owned by Jews. That doesn't happen because people are smart. If it did, there'd be a lot of other countries that would be competing. We're talking 6 million, 7 million in Israel, 6 million in the metropolitan part of New York State. That's amazing that this type of thing happens, and only God. Now let's look at some of these, and again, I said before, it's like it could be an hour, hour and a half, and these, we're going to be right in the middle of that. So we're going to whip through these quickly here. Now, even the guy that wrote the book on these, it's called Eye to Eye, he says that it could be coincidence on all these things. That's fine. Let's say it's all coincidence with the things we're going to look at. But still, take into account the fact that God said that those that bless his people, he will bless. Those that curse, he'll curse them. Look at some of the timeline of how this works. On October 30th, 1991, President George H.W. Bush opened the Madrid Peace Conference, pressing for land for peace with Israel, with Palestine. And that was, if those of you that are older probably remember this, a perfect storm forms in the North Atlantic. Large waves hit New England, including Kennebunkport, Maine, which happened to be where George H.W. Bush's vacation home was, and actually ruined that place on the same day. That when that storm was so treacherous, one of the things about it, it defied all nature, in that it went the opposite direction of how storms go. It came together in the Atlantic and then hit New England same day as Bush tried to give away land to Palestine. August 23rd, 1992, Madrid peace talks moved to Washington, D.C., and the U.S. is pressuring Israel on negotiations. Hurricane Andrew strikes southern Florida, one of the worst U.S. natural disasters up to that point. Same day, President Bill Clinton, on January 16, 1994, meets Syrian President Hafez al-Assad in Geneva discussing Israel giving up the Golan Heights. The Northridge earthquake, magnitude 6.9, hit Southern California, one of the costliest earthquakes in U.S. history. Now, this was an interesting one. No, not this one yet. October 15th to October 22nd, talk at Wye River Plantation, Maryland, negotiations for Israel to give up 13% of Judea and Samaria. Heavy rains, floods, and tornadoes strike southern Texas in that same time frame, causing $1 billion worth of damage. September 28, 1998, Secretary of State Madeleine Albright finalizes the deal for Israel to give up 13% of the land, meeting with Arafat and Netanyahu at White House. Hurricane Georges hits the Gulf Coast, winds 110 miles an hour, gusts 175 miles an hour, causing $1 billion in damage. December 2007, U.S.-sponsored Israeli-Palestinian meetings regarding land and peace. Back-to-back disasters, Washington State's largest flood on record, then Oklahoma's largest ice storm and power outage in state history within 10 days. The climate activists say the term has been used over and over in the last 30 years. A storm of the century, a storm of the millennium. There have been multiple storms of a century within the space of 10 years. Now, you could say maybe it is climate change, or maybe a lot of countries in the world, a lot of places, it's become more popular to go against Israel. Europe is against Israel 100%. And Europe's being taken over by Muslims. And it's destroying their economy, destroying their infrastructure, destroying the the ethnic fabric of what had made Europe so significant back in the last hundreds of years. August 2005, U.S. pressure supporting Israel's disengagement from Gaza under Prime Minister Ariel Sharon and urging elections even if Hamas wins. Hurricane Katrina forms and hits the U.S. Gulf Coast, Louisiana, Mississippi, huge devastation. An interesting thing on this one, along that same time, so they were actually pulling people out, telling Israelis, you have to leave your homes in these Gaza settlements and get out before we throw you out. Israel because America was pressuring them so much. They said it was about the same amount of area that was destroyed by Hurricane Katrina. In fact, the governors were saying, you have to evacuate, you have to leave your homes. Same thing that America was forcing Israel to tell their people to leave, and the same approximate area of land destroyed as U.S. was pressuring Israel to give up. U.S. administrations, Barack Obama and others, pressure Israel on settlements, land negotiations, Palestinian state dialogue, multiple record-setting hurricanes in the U.S., Hurricane Harvey, Irma, Maria, and Sandy. An interesting thing, too, not on here, is there are two different times that Bill Clinton went to give away the store on Israel. And first time they were meeting, that same day, files of the Monica Lewinsky scandal came out. The next time, the same day, letters of impeachment were filed. He flew to Israel and went to Palestinian-controlled Gaza to talk to them about giving them the land from Israel, and the impeachment trial started. Now, you could definitely say, well, that's all political. They're trying to take away the attention from what he was trying to do, blah, 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 blah. These are just the biggest ones. There's a ton of things. When you look at what happens when people go against the land of Israel and the people of Israel, things happen to people. Things happen to the countries. You could say it's all coincidence. Or you could say maybe God's not done with them. How about this? If all this bad stuff's happening to us, why doesn't Israel have any of that bad stuff ever happening to them? We're talking nations around them, hundreds of millions of people hate them. Their leaders actively talk about destroying them and pushing them into the sea. And they still are there. That shouldn't be. Not at all. And yet it's still, how many people remember Lebanon, Beirut, I think it was 4 years ago, they had a fireworks store kind of exploded, happened to be next door to a munitions depot. Took out like a quarter of the city, like it's just a huge explosion, just ripped through and all that type of stuff. They said, oh, it was, I think they tried to blame Israel for and all that. It's like this type of stuff hasn't happened in Israel. When it does, very few people end up dying, not like in many of these other places. So now let's look through the rest of Romans 11 here, and then we will finish up. Okay. Verse 11, we're going to breeze through here. You can read through all this at home. I say then, have they stumbled that they should fall? God forbid, but rather through their fall, salvation is come unto the Gentiles, for to provoke them to jealousy. Now if the fall of them be the riches of the world, and the diminishing of them the riches of the Gentiles, how much more their fullness? For I speak to you Gentiles, inasmuch as I am the apostle of the Gentiles, I magnify mine office. Go down to verse number 16. For if the first fruit be holy, the lump is also holy. And if the root be holy, so are the branches. And if some of the branches be broken off, and thou, Gentile, being a wild olive tree, wert grafted in among them, and with them partakest of the root and fatness of the olive tree. Some of the branches falling off, Israel, you're now grafted into them and receiving the fatness and the root from the olive tree. Boast not against the branches. He's telling them again, don't be, I'm better than Israel, or I have replaced Israel. But if thou boast, thou bearest not the root, but the root thee. So it's like, don't forget, the root is the one holding you up. Thou wilt say then, the branches were broken off that I might be grafted in. Well, because of unbelief they are broken off, and now standest by faith. Be not high-minded, but fear. For if God spared not the natural branches, take heed lest he also spare not thee. So God had broken these off because of their unbelief. We then, as the Gentiles, get grafted in. We are not to say, ha, look at you, look at me. And yet that's exactly what people do in the replacement covenant theology is, we have replaced Israel. We get all the blessings. We get enough blessings and promises of our own. We don't need theirs. Ours are great and abounding. As a Christian people, as the children of God, we don't need the ones for Israel. Look at verse number 23. And they also, if they abide not still in unbelief, shall be grafted in. For God is able to graft them in again. For if thou wert cut out of the olive tree, which is wild by nature, and wert grafted contrary to nature into a good olive tree, how much more shall these, which be the natural branches, be grafted into their own olive tree? In other words, I'm not done with them. For I would not, brethren, that ye should be ignorant of this mystery, lest ye should be wise in your own conceits, which is the perfect description of the people that are going on, blasting out those things today. That blindness in part is happened to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles be come in. And so all Israel shall be saved. It is written, there shall come out of Zion the deliverer, and shall turn away ungodliness from Jacob. Now, let me make sure I get these ones here. The church was not a replacement for Israel in its promises and blessings. Next one here too, it's on the backside. That God is going to save Israel in the future, so he's certainly not done with them. Look at Acts chapter 3. We're almost done. Acts chapter 3. Verse 25 and 26. Ye are the children of the prophets, and of the covenant which God made with our fathers, Jews, he's speaking to, saying unto Abraham, and in thy seed shall all the kindreds of the earth be blessed. Unto you first God, having raised up his Son Jesus, sent him to bless you, and turning away every one of you from his iniquities. This is after the people had already executed and crucified Jesus Christ. And it's saying, this is the blessing to you, that you could be saved from your iniquities. This is what Jesus was raised up for. This is the seed that has come to bless all the world. God is not done with them. Yes, as a nation they rejected God. Yes, they said his blood be upon us and upon our children. And yes, they are going to suffer. The tribulation is also called the time of Jacob's trouble. They are going to get punished. They are going to have tremendous things happen to them during that time. But even in that, God's mercy for his chosen people will be on display as he keeps them from destruction from the Antichrist. And then when he comes and he sets up his kingdom, he will usher the nation in. And they will then see him and receive him as their Messiah. and Israel will be saved. Now, how do we adjust? How do we frame it then? That if the common argument would be, or the prevalent argument right now is that, well, God does not want Christians to support the modern state of Israel. It's the future that God is talking about. The Bible shows us that things are in motion now as we approach the end times. It's not like that all of a sudden, day one, everything changes. You could see this in how the world is, that look at COVID, that so many nations of the world, and I think some of the leaders will be surprised, especially in America, I think in a lot of cases, the devil might have wanted to see, let's see how much people will trade out what they have for an assurance of something they think might save them. Now, that was something with, correct me if I'm wrong, was it 0.5% or 3% death rate? Not to minimize those that died, but it was a very small percentage. It was not something even, I don't even know if it topped 1%. Imagine when the rapture comes. And they can spin it however they want. Look at it right now. You go online, you go on social media, there's some wild stuff that's said out there. And people believe it. Your neighbors believe it. Your family members believe it. Imagine when they have no counter-argument and they're able to spin it however they want, why there's millions of people that have disappeared. I'm telling you right now, you see before, how is the Antichrist going to pull people together? And it's like after COVID, it's like, well, I can imagine a way when it's like, you know what? This is what happened that destroyed all of these people. I have the cure to make sure that never happens again, and we can bring us into, and I will usher the world into a utopia like it's never seen before. Start the little spin meisters, and eventually people, they're going to believe a lie anyway. But you see how already the devil has allowed things to keep going and keep pushing and shoving this stuff into the forefront so that people are more easily ready for the coming of the Antichrist. So things are in motion now. God's talked about that. We see that things that we did not quite understand before, even in the book of Revelation, as we get closer, they stand out a little bit more. I mean, I remember, I don't know if it's on here, 1980-something, you know, UPC symbols, the product codes? Like they used to say that, you know, the first one, the middle one, and the last one, they're 666. So that's going to be the thing. We're going to get a UPC signal barcoded. That was going to be the mark of the beast. Well, now we see that people are actually willingly getting marks injected into them that hold all the information of they're thinking, this is smart. If something ever happens to me, I lose my memory, I have all my banking information, it has all my private information right here, so I can retrieve it all easily. People are willingly doing that. When it's tied to the fact that you're not going to trade, you're not going to eat unless you have this, they'll do it in a heartbeat. But you see how the advances have been made, that it doesn't have to be a UPC symbol. It could be something that was never even thought about back then. Same thing with Israel. Israel is in place now. God has called them together, retrieved them from the surrounding countries as they keep coming back, and to the point that, you know, every single thing for the temple has been built. They have every article ready. I know the rabbi in charge of the Temple Institute that does all that. He was telling me some of the stuff and showing me some of they've had it all done for years. They have everything they need. The one thing they don't have is the place. And they've already figured out how they could probably get it in there. But you're going to tell me that modern state of Israel is not the one that we're supposed to bless? Again, we don't have to agree with everything they've done. But I'm going to try to bless God's chosen people. Because God said, whoever blesses them, I will bless. And I would be very nervous if I'm any of these people trying to say, you know, I mean, there's horrible names being given. I mean, like some of the things online, no wonder Israel is willing to spend $1 billion to try to move the conservative mind on it. Because people are being, online, I see all the time, oh, you see what I see? You know what they're talking about? The nose. It's like, what a sad thing growing up as a Jew, and it's a distinctive facial feature that is common to them. And that is how people are looking at it and being like, you deserve to rot because of who you are. I'm a kid. I'm a kid that has stories of how my grandparents were killed. And now you want me dead? I think actually this is going to help us see more Jews come to Christ. Because now it's getting separated. You have people that are calling themselves Christians that hate Israel. That's not a Christian attribute. So guess what? This gives you even more of a window. Before, it's like, really, if you love Israel, you're not probably liberal. That's like the barrier. It's not like you're anybody special. But now, if you love Israel and if you want to bless Israel, you're probably a Bible-believing Christian. And that's one of my biggest doors in opening a witness with Jews, is telling them, yeah, I'm a Christian, and I love you. I love Israel. I love the Jewish people. Why? Because Jesus said we should do that. Because Jesus died to bring that blessing to you. And you get to explain to them why we love the Jewish people. So don't be swayed by the powerful rhetoric that goes on. Don't make any mistake about it. We saw in the Old Testament, we saw in the New Testament, we've seen God's hand protect through history, we've seen God's continued blessing on the nation today. If America, that's a sad thing. People have been talking for generations that America's not visible in end times prophecy. There's no superpower America. That doesn't exist. China, Russia, Lebanon, Syria, Egypt, Algeria, Libya, Iran, they're all mentioned, but no America. And that's kind of the sad thing, is I'm guessing we're going to have a very, very, very liberal, Israel-hating, God-hating president before it's all over. And that's going to be what's going to happen. They'll turn against Israel. And that will be when God says, I'm done. And America's now poised for that. You have a lot of the people that have always hated Israel. You have a massive influx of Muslims that are teaching people about why Israel's wrong. And now you have people on the right that hate Israel. It's not going to be long. So that's why I definitely find a Jewish person. Be a blessing to them. They've got their season of Hanukkah coming up. Be a blessing to them. Just, hey, could you tell me a little bit about Hanukkah, what it means to you, this and that? Form a relationship with people. Lord willing, in the next, we got Brother Morales. He'll be here for our missions conference in April. But we will hopefully be able to have him in some other time with an Israeli soldier. Talk about being able to be a blessing to a Jewish person that comes right to our church. That'd be a blessing. But in the meantime, don't be swayed. And that's one of the reasons why you stay in the Bible. Doesn't matter if somebody you like and have always agreed with switches gears and goes against the Bible. If you know what the Bible says, you're like, no, I'm not going to move from that. And hopefully you have a better understanding of that over the last couple of weeks. So let's close in prayer, and we'll pray for a blessing of the banana cake. Is that what it is? Banana.